The spring rain pelted against the windows of the Apex Tower, a 60-story glass and steel monolith that dominated the downtown Atlanta skyline. On the 58th floor, Marcus Reynolds sat in quiet contemplation, watching raindrops race each other down the glass of his corner office. At 42, Marcus had built Quantum Innovations from a small tech startup in his garage into one of the fastest-growing companies in the Southeast. The journey had been anything but easy for a black man in an industry that still struggled with diversity, but Marcus's brilliance, perseverance, and uncanny ability to identify market opportunities had propelled him forward. His office reflected both his success and his character, tastefully appointed with modern furniture, walls adorned with abstract art from local black artists, and shelves displaying awards alongside family photos. A framed newspaper article from the Atlanta Business Chronicle hung prominently near his desk. Marcus Reynolds, named among 40 under 40 business leaders transforming the South. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Marcus called, turning from the window. His assistant, Tanya Williams, entered with a tablet in hand. "Mr. Reynolds, the Westridge Capital representatives are here for the 2 p.m. meeting. They're waiting in the main conference room." "Thank you, Tanya. I'll be there in a moment." Marcus straightened his custom-tailored navy suit and adjusted his red tie, a splash of confidence for what promised to be a pivotal meeting. Westridge Capital was considering a significant investment in Quantum, which would accelerate their expansion into international markets. The deal had been months in the making. "Also," Tanya added hesitantly, "Mr. Patterson called again about the CMO position. He's quite persistent." Marcus sighed. Richard Patterson, a well-connected former executive at a rival tech firm, had been aggressively pursuing the chief marketing officer position that had opened up when Quantum's previous CMO retired. Patterson had impressive credentials, but something about his approach felt off to Marcus. Every interaction seemed tinged with condescension, as if he were doing Quantum a favor by considering the position. "Tell him we're still evaluating candidates and will be in touch next week," Marcus replied. He preferred thoroughness in hiring decisions, especially for his executive team. As Diane prepared the market expansion projections for today's presentation. "Yes, she sent them over an hour ago. They're loaded in the conference room system, and I've added them to your tablet as well." "Perfect. Let's not keep our visitors waiting then." Marcus followed Tanya through the executive suite towards the main conference room. The office hummed with the energy that had become Quantum's trademark. Diverse teams of engineers, designers, and business professionals engaged in animated discussions, gathered around whiteboards covered in diagrams and code snippets. Many employees nodded or smiled as Marcus passed, the casual respect indicative of the company culture he'd fostered. As they approached the conference room, Marcus could see through the glass walls that the Westridge team had arrived in force. 5 men in expensive suits, papers and tablets spread across the table. James Westridge III himself, the firm's founding partner, sat at the head of the table with his back to the door. Tanya opened the door, announcing, "Mr. Reynolds has arrived." 5 heads turned toward Marcus as he entered, but before he could speak, one of the Westridge executives, a red-faced man with silver hair who looked to be in his 60s, furrowed his brow and asked, "Is Daniel Hamilton delayed? We were told the CEO would be joining us." A brief, awkward silence fell over the room. Marcus maintained his composed smile, all too familiar with this type of assumption. "I'm Marcus Reynolds, founder and CEO of Quantum Innovations. Welcome to our headquarters, gentlemen." He moved forward with his hand extended toward James Westridge. The executive who had spoken looked momentarily flustered, but recovered quickly. "Ah, my mistake. Carson Phillips, head of acquisitions at Westridge." He shook Marcus's hand with a grip that was slightly too firm, compensating for his error. James Westridge rose to greet Marcus with a politician's practiced smile. "Marcus, good to finally meet in person after all our calls. You've built quite an impressive operation here." Thank you, James. We're proud of what we've accomplished and excited about where we're headed next, hopefully with Westridge as a partner. Marcus took a seat opposite Westridge, with Diane Chen, Quantum's CFO, and Michael Okafor, the CTO, on either side of him. The meeting proceeded smoothly as Marcus led the presentation outlining Quantum's proprietary technology, market position, and growth strategy. He navigated challenging questions with the ease of someone who understood every aspect of his business, occasionally deferring to Diane or Michael for specific technical or financial details. Nearly an hour into the presentation, as Marcus was explaining their expansion strategy for Asian markets, the conference room door opened without a knock. A tall white man in his late 30s with slicked-back blonde hair and a grey suit strode in confidently, as if entering his own board meeting. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption," the man announced, his voice carrying an entitled edge. He approached the table without acknowledging Marcus. "Richard Patterson. I was in the building for another meeting and wanted to introduce myself while you were here." Marcus stared in disbelief. Richard Patterson, the same man who'd been pestering Tanya about the CMO position, had somehow gained access to their most sensitive investor meeting and was now inserting himself uninvited. Before Marcus could speak, James Westridge rose with recognition lighting his face. "Richard, I didn't know you were affiliated with Quantum now. Wonderful to see you again." "Not officially affiliated yet," Patterson replied with a knowing smile. "But we've been having some promising discussions." He finally turned toward Marcus with a nod that barely qualified as acknowledgement. Marcus stood, maintaining his professional demeanor despite his growing irritation. "Mr. Patterson, we haven't scheduled any meeting for today. This is a private discussion with our potential investment partners. Perhaps Tanya can arrange a proper time for us to continue our conversation about the CMO position." Patterson's smile didn't waver. Of course. I just thought since James and I go way back, we were in the same fraternity at Dartmouth, it might be useful for him to hear my thoughts on Quantum's potential. After all, I've been in the industry for quite some time." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Diane Chen shifted in her seat, while Michael Okafor's expression darkened. The Westridge executives exchanged glances that Marcus couldn't quite interpret. "Richard," Marcus said evenly, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this meeting has been carefully structured to present our company's vision and data. As the CEO and founder, exactly why I thought I could be of assistance," Patterson interrupted, turning to address Westridge directly. "James, Quantum has an incredible foundation, but what they're missing is someone with established connections in the major markets they're targeting. The technology is solid, but the marketing approach lacks the sophistication that someone with my background could bring." Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression neutral. This was beyond presumptuous. It was a deliberate undermining of his authority in front of crucial investors. Years of navigating racially charged corporate environments had taught him that displaying anger, no matter how justified, would only reinforce stereotypes. "Perhaps," Marcus began carefully, "we should—" "Actually," Westridge interjected, "Richard makes an interesting point." He looked at Marcus with an evaluative gaze. "We've been impressed with the technical aspects of Quantum, but marketing has been one of our concerns. Richard's track record in launching tech products globally is remarkable." Patterson smoothly pulled out an empty chair right next to Westridge and sat down without being invited. "I've actually prepared some thoughts on Quantum's market positioning." He removed a tablet from his briefcase and slid it toward Westridge. "These are just preliminary ideas, of course." Marcus exchanged a brief glance with Diane, whose slight headshake communicated her shared disbelief at the situation unfolding. This was unprecedented. A job candidate essentially hijacking an investor meeting and being welcomed by the lead investor. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, reasserting control of the room, "while I appreciate Mr. Patterson's initiative, this meeting was scheduled to discuss the specific proposals our team has developed. We're open to all input, but through appropriate channels and processes. Carson Phillips, the executive who had initially mistaken Marcus for someone other than the CEO, cleared his throat. Perhaps, Mr. Reynolds, it might be beneficial to hear fresh perspectives. In our experience, sometimes an outside view can identify blind spots. The subtle alliance forming between Patterson and the Westridge team was becoming increasingly apparent. Marcus had faced countless microaggressions throughout his career, but this was different, a more blatant challenge to his leadership in his own company. "I'm all for fresh perspectives," Marcus replied, maintaining his composure. "That's why Quantum has one of the most diverse executive teams in the industry, but there are proper channels for these discussions." "Marcus," Westridge said, his tone suddenly patronizing, "in deals of this magnitude, flexibility is key. Why don't we take a few minutes to hear Richard out? After all, if he's being considered for your executive team, his input could be valuable to our assessment." Before Marcus could respond, Patterson was already connecting his tablet to the conference room display. The Quantum logo appeared on screen, but altered with different colors and a new tagline: "Quantum, Beyond Innovation." Gentlemen, the issue isn't that Quantum lacks innovation, it's that their current branding and market approach doesn't effectively communicate their capabilities to enterprise clients. I've taken the liberty of mocking up some alternatives that position them more effectively in the premium space. For the next 15 minutes, Marcus watched in stunned silence as Patterson effectively took over the meeting, presenting a marketing strategy that contradicted much of what Marcus had built the company around, including its commitment to accessibility and its focus on emerging markets. Yet the Westridge team was nodding along, asking questions, and engaging with Patterson as if he were the authority on Quantum's future. When Patterson finally paused, James Westridge turned to Marcus with what seemed like renewed interest. "These are compelling concepts, especially the enterprise focus. What are your thoughts, Marcus?" The question felt like a test, one with no right answer. Criticize Patterson's ideas, and he might appear defensive or resistant to change. Embrace them, and he would be validating this extraordinary breach of protocol and undermining his own leadership. "I think," Marcus began diplomatically, "that Mr. Patterson has clearly given this some thought. However, his approach fundamentally misunderstands our company's mission. Quantum was founded to democratize advanced technology, not to restrict it to premium enterprise clients. Our growth has come precisely because we've made sophisticated solutions accessible to mid-market companies that our competitors ignore." Patterson's smile tightened slightly. "With all due respect, that approach might have worked in the early stages, but to reach the valuation targets that would make the Westridge investment worthwhile, a pivot to enterprise is essential. The numbers simply don't add up otherwise." "The numbers have added up quite effectively for the past 7 years, Marcus countered, feeling his patience wearing thin. "Our compound annual growth rate of 43% suggests our strategy is sound." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. James Westridge glanced at his watch, then at his colleagues before addressing the table. "This has been an enlightening discussion. Perhaps we should take a short break to digest all this information." He turned to Patterson. "Richard, could I have a word in private?" "Of course, James," Patterson replied, the satisfaction evident in his voice. As the two men stepped outside the conference room, Marcus turned to his team. "What just happened?" he asked in a low voice. Michael Okafor, normally the most reserved member of the executive team, shook his head in disgust. "That was the most disrespectful display I've seen in my 20 years in tech. The man walked in and basically tried to usurp your position in your own company." Diane Chen nodded in agreement. "And Westridge enabled it. The question is why? They've spent months evaluating our company, our financials, our technology. Why would they suddenly be swayed by marketing mock-ups from someone who doesn't even work here?" Before Marcus could respond, the conference room door opened again. James Westridge returned alone, his expression unreadable as he took his seat. "Marcus," he began, his tone now all business, "we at Westridge have been impressed with what you've built here. Truly. But we're also concerned about Quantum's ability to scale to the level that would make our investment worthwhile." Marcus felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. He had faced enough discrimination to recognize what was coming. "Our discussions with Richard have been illuminating," Westridge continued. "His vision for Quantum's future aligns closely with what we believe would position the company for maximum growth. To be frank, we'd be much more comfortable moving forward with this investment if he were taking a leadership role in the company's next phase." The implication hung in the air for a moment before Westridge made it explicit. "We'd like to propose a restructuring as part of our investment. Richard would come in as CEO to focus on market expansion and enterprise strategy, while you would transition to a chairman role focusing on technology innovation, which is clearly your strength." Marcus felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. After 7 years of building Quantum from nothing, after navigating countless obstacles that his white counterparts never faced, after proving his business acumen quarter after quarter, he was being asked to step aside for a white man who had waltzed in uninvited to his meeting. Diane spoke up, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Mr. Westridge, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. Marcus has grown this company at a rate that exceeds industry standards, with profitability metrics that outperform most of our competitors. On what basis would you suggest such a dramatic leadership change?" "It's not a reflection on Marcus's capabilities," Westridge replied smoothly. "It's about positioning the company for its next growth phase. Different stages require different leadership approaches." Marcus had remained silent, processing the breathtaking audacity of what was being proposed. Now he straightened in his chair, his decision made. "James," he said calmly, "let me be perfectly clear. I founded Quantum Innovations. I've built it from a 3-person startup to a company of over 400 employees. I've secured 5 rounds of funding and maintained controlling interest through all of them." He paused, making eye contact with each of the Westridge representatives. "No one will be replacing me as CEO of my own company. Not today, not ever." A flicker of surprise crossed Westridge's face, as if he hadn't expected such direct resistance. "Marcus, I understand your attachment to the role, but sometimes the best thing a founder can do for their company is recognize when new leadership is needed. This isn't personal, it's business." "Is it?" Marcus asked, his voice level but carrying an edge of steel. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems remarkably personal. Mr. Patterson has no experience with our technology, our company culture, or our client base. He has, however, managed to leverage a fraternity connection to suggest displacing the black founder of a successful company. So forgive me if I question whether this is strictly business." The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Carson Phillips flushed red again, while another Westridge executive suddenly became very interested in his tablet. James Westridge's practiced smile faltered. "No one is suggesting that race is a factor here," Westridge said stiffly. "No one ever does," Marcus replied. "Yet somehow black executives and founders face these "it's just business" suggestions to step aside at significantly higher rates than our white counterparts. The data on that is quite clear." The door opened again, and Richard Patterson strode back in, seemingly unaware of the tension he was walking into. "Have we reached a decision?" he asked, glancing between Marcus and Westridge with poorly concealed anticipation. Marcus stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a deliberate motion. "Yes, we have. Westridge Capital will not be investing in Quantum Innovations under the terms you've proposed. And you, Mr. Patterson, will not be joining our executive team in any capacity." Patterson's confident expression faltered. "I think you're making a serious mistake." "No!" Marcus cut him off firmly. "The mistake was allowing you into this meeting. My assistant will show you out." As if on cue, Tanya opened the conference room door, her expression making it clear she'd been monitoring the situation. "This is absurd," Patterson protested, turning to Westridge for support. "James, surely you can make him see reason." Westridge looked uncomfortable, caught between the two men. "Marcus, perhaps we should take some time to reconsider. Our offer is substantial, and—" "Your offer," Marcus interrupted, "comes with conditions that are unacceptable. I've built this company on integrity and innovation, not backroom deals and corporate takeovers." He pressed a button on the conference phone. "Security, please escort Mr. Patterson from the building. His visitor access is permanently revoked." Patterson's face contorted with anger. "You're making the biggest mistake of your career. Quantum needs connections like mine to survive at the next level." "What Quantum needs," Marcus replied calmly, "is partners who respect its leadership and its values. Now please leave before security arrives." With a final glare, Patterson gathered his tablet and stormed out, nearly colliding with a security officer in the hallway. The Westridge team sat in uncomfortable silence as Marcus remained standing, his expression resolute. Finally, James Westridge cleared his throat. "Marcus, perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Our intent was not to—" "I think your intent was perfectly clear," Marcus interrupted, his tone professional but unyielding. "Gentlemen, I believe this concludes our meeting. Tanya will show you out." As the Westridge executives gathered their materials, looking somewhat shell-shocked by the turn of events, Carson Phillips approached Marcus with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Reynolds, for what it's worth, I think we may have mishandled this situation. If you're open to further discussions under different terms—" "My contact information won't change," Marcus replied coolly. "If Westridge wishes to propose an investment that doesn't involve reshuffling our leadership, I'm always willing to listen. But understand this, I will never step aside from the company I built to satisfy someone else's comfort level with who should be in charge." After the Westridge team had departed, Marcus returned to his office, the weight of what had just transpired settling on his shoulders. Turning down a major investment was a significant business decision, one that would delay their international expansion plans. Yet the alternative, surrendering control to people who had so blatantly disrespected his leadership, was unthinkable. Diane and Michael followed him in, closing the door behind them. "That was intense," Michael said, breaking the silence. "For what it's worth, you made the right call. Patterson would have destroyed everything we've built here." Diane nodded in agreement, but looked concerned. "The right call, ethically, absolutely. But strategically, we needed that capital for the European expansion. The board is going to have questions." Marcus gazed out at the Atlanta skyline, rain still streaming down the windows. "The board will understand when I explain what Westridge was really proposing. No legitimate investor asks a successful founder CEO to step aside for someone with no connection to the company. Unless they don't see the founder as the right face for the company they're investing in," Michael said quietly, the implication clear. Marcus turned back to his team. "This isn't the first time I've faced this kind of situation, and it won't be the last. But I refuse to be pushed out of my own company by people who can't see past their biases." He squared his shoulders, determination replacing the momentary doubt. "We'll find another investment partner, one that values what we've built and respects who built it." "What about Patterson?" Diane asked. "He seemed pretty connected. Should we be concerned about blowback?" Marcus shook his head. "Richard Patterson is a symptom, not the disease. Men like him have always believed they're entitled to take what others have built, but he picked the wrong company this time." As Diane and Michael left to address the fallout from the meeting, Marcus remained at the window, watching the storm clouds begin to break apart over Atlanta. In the reflection of the glass, he could see the framed article on his wall. Marcus Reynolds, named among 40 under 40 business leaders transforming the South. Despite everything that had just happened, a small smile formed on his lips. Transformation had never come easily, but that had never stopped him before, and it wouldn't stop him now. If this story resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. The following morning, Marcus arrived at Quantum's headquarters earlier than usual, determined to get ahead of any fallout from the Westridge meeting. The news that their planned investment had fallen through would inevitably raise questions among employees and board members alike. As the elevator ascended to the executive floor, Marcus mentally rehearsed how he would frame the situation. Transparency had always been a cornerstone of his leadership style, but he needed to balance honesty with stability. The last thing the company needed was panic about their financial runway. Stepping off the elevator, he was surprised to find Tanya already at her desk, despite the early hour. "Good morning," she greeted him, looking up from her computer. "The executive team is waiting for you in the conference room. They called an emergency meeting about 20 minutes ago." Marcus frowned. "Did they say what it's about?" "No, but Mr. Green from the board is there, along with Ms. Wilson from legal." Tanya hesitated. "And there's something else. Richard Patterson called 3 times this morning, insisting it's urgent that he speak with you." "I'm sure he does," Marcus muttered. "Let the executive team know I'll be there in 5 minutes. And if Patterson calls again, tell him all communication should go through our legal department." In his office, Marcus quickly checked his emails, finding an unusually high volume of messages since the previous evening. Most concerning was one from Stephen Green, Quantum's lead investor and board member, sent at 11:47 p.m. "Need to discuss Westridge situation ASAP, received concerning call." So Patterson had wasted no time reaching out to Quantum's board. Marcus wasn't entirely surprised, but the speed with which the man was attempting to undermine him was remarkable. After gathering his thoughts and a few key documents, Marcus made his way to the conference room where the executive team awaited. As he entered, the conversation that had been flowing stopped abruptly, and 6 pairs of eyes turned to him with expressions ranging from concern to confusion. "Good morning," Marcus said, taking his usual seat at the head of the table. "I understand there's some urgency about yesterday's meeting with Westridge." Stephen Green, a venture capitalist in his 60s who had been Quantum's first major investor, leaned forward. "Marcus, I received a call last night from James Westridge. He described a situation that, frankly, has me deeply concerned. According to him, you unilaterally rejected a substantial investment offer because you weren't willing to consider organizational changes that might benefit the company." Marcus met Green's gaze steadily. "That's one interpretation of events. Let me offer another. Westridge attempted to condition their investment on removing me as CEO and installing a man who walked into our meeting uninvited and has no experience with our company, our technology, or our mission." "James mentioned Richard Patterson," Green acknowledged. "He speaks highly of him, says he has the kind of connections and experience that could accelerate Quantum's growth. He also suggested that you reacted emotionally to their proposal." The coded language wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The emotional black person stereotype was a familiar tool used to discredit and dismiss. "I reacted appropriately to an inappropriate suggestion," Marcus replied calmly. "Westridge essentially proposed a hostile takeover disguised as an investment. They wanted to replace the founder and CEO of a successful company with someone whose primary qualification appears to be that he attended the same college as James Westridge." Amanda Wilson, Quantum's chief legal officer, spoke up. "From a governance perspective, any change in CEO would require board approval anyway. Westridge couldn't have actually forced this through as a condition of investment. But they could have made the investment contingent on the board approving the change," Marcus pointed out, "which puts tremendous pressure on the board to comply or risk losing the capital." Stephen Green shifted uncomfortably. Look, Marcus, no one is suggesting you should be removed as CEO. You've built something remarkable here. But as the company grows, roles evolve. Many successful founders eventually move into chairman positions where they can focus on vision and strategy while letting others handle day-to-day operations. Marcus felt a flicker of disappointment, but not surprise. Green was taking the same patronizing approach as Westridge, just more diplomatically. "Stephen," Marcus said, his voice level but firm, "when I founded this company, you were the first to invest because you believed in my vision and my ability to execute it. In the 7 years since, we've grown from a 3-person startup to a company valued at over $200 million. Our technology is industry-leading, our client satisfaction is at 96%, and our growth trajectory exceeds every projection we've ever made." He paused, making eye contact with each person at the table. "At what point in that success story did I demonstrate that I'm not capable of leading this company through its next phase of growth?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Diane Chen, who had witnessed the Westridge meeting firsthand, finally spoke up. "As CFO, I can confirm that our financial performance has been exceptional under Marcus's leadership. What happened in that meeting yesterday wasn't about business strategy or organizational efficiency. It was about certain people's discomfort with who sits in the CEO chair." Michael Okafor nodded in agreement. "I was there too. The way Patterson inserted himself and the way Westridge immediately deferred to him over our CEO was revealing, to say the least." Stephen Green sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "I'm not saying I agree with Westridge's approach, but the reality is they're one of the few investment firms with the capital and connections we need for the European expansion. Without their funding, we're looking at a significant delay to our growth strategy. There are other investors," Marcus responded confidently, "ones who will value what we've built here without trying to change who built it." Amanda Wilson, who had been taking notes throughout the discussion, looked up. "Actually, that brings us to another issue. Richard Patterson has apparently been reaching out to several people in the industry since yesterday, suggesting that Quantum is in leadership turmoil. He's positioning himself as someone being brought in to stabilize the company." Marcus felt his jaw tighten but kept his expression neutral. "So, in addition to trying to take my job, he's now actively spreading misinformation about our company to damage our reputation." "It gets worse," Amanda continued. "He's apparently scheduled meetings with at least 2 of our potential investors. According to my contact at Berkshire Tech Partners, Patterson implied he has board support to assume a leadership role at Quantum." The revelation sent a ripple of alarm through the room. Stephen Green looked genuinely surprised. "That's completely false. The board has had no such discussions." "False, but potentially damaging," Marcus noted. "If he's scaring off other investors with these claims, he's effectively forcing us back toward Westridge as our only option." He turned to Amanda. "What are our legal options here?" "We can send a cease and desist letter immediately," she replied. "What he's doing could constitute tortious interference with business relationships, but litigation takes time, and the damage to our fundraising efforts could be immediate." Marcus nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Send the cease and desist, but we also need to take more direct action." He turned to their head of communications. "Jessica, prepare a statement affirming the company's strong performance and stable leadership. Don't mention Patterson by name. That would only give credibility to his claims. Instead, emphasize our growth metrics and the board's confidence in our current direction." "On it," Jessica replied, already typing notes on her tablet. "Stephen," Marcus continued, "I need you and the other board members to make calls personally to our key investment prospects. Reassure them that the company is stable and that any rumors to the contrary are unfounded." Green nodded, seeming relieved to have a concrete action plan. "I can do that. James Westridge and I go back a long way too. I'll see if I can understand what really happened there." "Thank you," Marcus said. In the meantime, we proceed with business as usual. Our Q2 results are strong, and we have enough runway to extend our timeline for the next funding round if necessary. As the meeting wrapped up and the team dispersed with their respective assignments, Stephen Green lingered behind. Once they were alone, he approached Marcus with a concerned expression. "Marcus, I want you to know that I fully support your leadership. You've proven yourself many times over, but—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The reality of this industry, of this country, is that you will face obstacles that others don't. It's not fair, it's not right, but it is reality." "I'm well aware of that reality, Stephen," Marcus replied. "I've been navigating it my entire career." "I know you have," Green acknowledged, "and you've done it remarkably well. I just want to make sure that in standing your ground, which you have every right to do, you don't inadvertently harm the company you've worked so hard to build." Marcus understood the concern behind Green's words, even if it carried echoes of the same bias he'd faced in the Westridge meeting. The subtle suggestion that his principled stand might damage the company was another version of the familiar refrain: be less assertive, be more accommodating, prioritize others' comfort over your own dignity. "The company's best interests and my position as CEO are not in conflict," Marcus said firmly. "Quantum thrives because of the culture and vision I've established. Allowing someone to undermine that leadership would do far more damage than standing firm against a biased takeover attempt." Green nodded slowly. "You're probably right. Just know that whatever happens, you have my support, both personally and as a board member." "I appreciate that," Marcus replied, genuinely grateful for the affirmation, despite his frustration with parts of their conversation. "We'll get through this stronger than before." As Green left, Marcus remained in the conference room, considering his next steps. Patterson's attempts to undermine him externally were concerning but manageable with the right strategy. The more immediate challenge was maintaining team morale and business momentum while navigating this unexpected obstacle. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in some time. Vanessa Hayes was a tech investor with a growing reputation for backing diverse founders. They had met at a conference the previous year and had maintained occasional contact. Marcus had been hesitant to approach her fund because they typically invested in earlier stage companies, but circumstances had changed. The call connected after 2 rings. "Marcus Reynolds," Vanessa's warm voice came through the speaker. "It's been too long. How are you?" "Navigating some interesting waters," Marcus replied honestly. "Do you have time for coffee tomorrow? There's an opportunity I'd like to discuss with you." "For you?" "Always. Ponce City Market at 10? Perfect. And Vanessa, this conversation stays between us for now." "Understood. See you tomorrow." As Marcus ended the call, a notification appeared on his screen, an email from Richard Patterson to Quantum's entire board of directors, copied to Marcus himself. The subject line read, "Urgent concerns regarding leadership and strategic direction." Marcus opened the email, unsurprised yet still dismayed by Patterson's audacity. The message was a masterclass in corporate undermining, expressing deep concern about Quantum's ability to scale under current leadership, referencing troubling reports from industry insiders, and positioning himself as a reluctant but necessary solution to problems that didn't actually exist. Most disturbing was the closing paragraph, where Patterson claimed to have secured preliminary interest from alternative investors who share my vision for Quantum's future. A clear threat that he was actively working to orchestrate a hostile takeover. Marcus forwarded the email to Amanda Wilson with a brief note. "Add this to the cease and desist documentation. Also, look into whether his claims about alternative investors constitute securities fraud if he's misrepresenting his relationship with the company." He then closed his laptop and stood, deciding to walk the floor and connect with his team members directly. In times of uncertainty, visibility mattered. Whatever Patterson might be claiming externally within these walls, Marcus was still the founder and CEO of Quantum Innovations, and no amount of underhanded tactics would change that reality. As he stepped out of the conference room, Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. This wasn't just about defending his position, it was about protecting the company he had built and the culture he had fostered. Patterson and Westridge had underestimated him, a mistake many had made before, and one they would soon regret. 3 days after the disastrous meeting with Westridge Capital, Marcus Reynolds sat across from Vanessa Hayes in a quiet corner of a bustling cafe in Atlanta's Ponce City Market. The renovated historic building, once a Sears, Roebuck & Co. distribution center, now housed shops, restaurants, and offices, a fitting symbol of transformation and renewal that resonated with Marcus's current situation. "So, let me get this straight," Vanessa said, setting down her coffee cup after Marcus had recounted the events with Westridge and Patterson. "This guy crashes your investor meeting, tries to stage a coup on the spot, and then launches a smear campaign when you show him the door." "That about sums it up," Marcus replied. "What's most concerning is how quickly Westridge was willing to entertain the idea. We'd been in discussions for months. They'd done extensive due diligence on our technology and financials. Yet one meeting with Patterson had them suggesting a complete leadership overhaul." Vanessa shook her head, her expression a mixture of disgust and knowing resignation. "Unfortunately, I've seen this play out before. The tech industry talks a good game about diversity and inclusion, but when it comes to black founders, especially successful ones, there's still this underlying assumption that we must have had help, or that we've reached our ceiling." As a black woman who had navigated venture capital as both an entrepreneur and now an investor, Vanessa understood the dynamics all too well. Her fund, Ascend Capital, had been created specifically to address the massive funding gap for founders from underrepresented backgrounds. "The question is," she continued, "what's your next move? You mentioned Quantum needs capital for European expansion. How urgent is that timeline?" Marcus considered this carefully. "We have runway for another 9 months at current burn. The expansion would accelerate our growth significantly, but it's not do or die. What concerns me more is the potential damage to our reputation and investor relationships if Patterson's narrative gains traction. Has he backed off since your legal team sent the cease and desist?" "Publicly, yes. But I'm hearing through industry channels that he's still having private conversations, positioning himself as Quantum's incoming savior. And Westridge hasn't completely walked away. Stephen Green spoke with James Westridge yesterday, and apparently they're still interested in investing under revised terms." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Those terms still involve you taking a diminished role?" "Not explicitly, but they want to expand the board with 2 of their appointees and create a new president position that would effectively take over much of the operational control." Marcus smiled without humor. "Death by 1,000 cuts instead of 1 clean stroke." "Classic," Vanessa muttered. She was quiet for a moment, seemingly weighing something in her mind. "Marcus, how much are you looking to raise in this round?" "40 million. Enough to establish European headquarters in London and Berlin, build out local teams, and support operations for the first 18 months while we scale revenue in those markets." Vanessa nodded slowly. "That's outside Ascend's typical range. We usually cap at 15 million, but—" She leaned forward, lowering her voice slightly. "I've been having conversations with Threshold Ventures about creating a joint fund for larger investments in diverse-led companies at the growth stage. Your situation might be the perfect catalyst to formalize that partnership." Marcus felt the first spark of genuine optimism since the Westridge debacle. Threshold was a respected firm with a strong track record in enterprise tech. A partnership with Ascend could provide not just the capital Quantum needed, but also a powerful statement about who they chose to align with. "How soon could we potentially move on this?" he asked. I can have preliminary conversations today. We'd still need to go through proper diligence, of course, but I've been following Quantum's progress for a while, and I'm familiar with your technology." Vanessa smiled. "Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best opportunities. This could be a much better fit than Westridge ever would have been." "I appreciate that, Vanessa. Truly." Marcus paused, considering whether to share the next piece of information. "There's something else you should know. I've been working on a contingency plan that might change the dynamics of this situation significantly." He reached into his briefcase and retrieved a sealed envelope, sliding it across the table to Vanessa. "This is confidential, but as a potential investor, you should be aware. Take a look when you're alone, and we can discuss once you've reviewed it." Vanessa took the envelope with a curious expression, but didn't open it. "Intriguing. I'll review this tonight." As they finished their coffee and prepared to leave, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Tanya. "Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow at 9 a.m. All members confirmed attendance. R. Patterson listed as invited guest." Marcus showed the message to Vanessa, whose expression darkened. "They're making their move. Patterson must have convinced enough board members to give him a formal hearing. Or Stephen Green set this up to clear the air once and for all," Marcus suggested, though he didn't entirely believe it himself. "Either way," Vanessa said, "tomorrow's meeting could determine Quantum's future direction. You need to be prepared for every scenario." She tapped the envelope he'd given her. "Including the one in here, I suspect." Marcus nodded grimly. "Tomorrow, one way or another, this situation gets resolved." The following morning, Marcus arrived at Quantum headquarters at 7:30 a.m., well before the scheduled board meeting. He wanted time to center himself and review his materials without interruption. The office was quiet, with only a few early-rising engineers already at their desks in the open workspace. In his office, Marcus laid out the documents he'd prepared, financial reports highlighting the company's strong performance under his leadership, testimonials from key clients, and a detailed strategic plan for international expansion. He also had a separate folder containing what he called his nuclear option, information he hoped he wouldn't need to use but had prepared nonetheless. A soft knock on his door interrupted his preparations. He looked up to see Diane Chen standing in the doorway, her expression serious. "Morning, Diane. You're here early. Wanted to catch you before the meeting," she replied, closing the door behind her. "I just heard something concerning. Richard Patterson was seen having dinner with two of our board members last night, Wilkins and Rodriguez." Marcus frowned. Thomas Wilkins and Elena Rodriguez were newer board members who represented smaller investors. They had always been cordial, but not particularly close to Marcus. "Do we know what they discussed?" "Not specifically, but my contact said they were there for over 3 hours. That's a long dinner for a casual conversation." "Patterson's building alliances," Marcus concluded, "trying to secure votes before the meeting." Diane nodded. "I'm afraid so. And with Green potentially wavering, it could get complicated." Marcus finished her thought. He considered the implications. The Quantum Board consisted of 7 members. Marcus himself, Stephen Green, Thomas Wilkins, Elena Rodriguez, Diane as CFO, and 2 independent directors, Rajiv Mehta and Sarah Johnson. If Patterson had swayed Wilkins and Rodriguez, and Green was uncertain, Marcus would need both Rajiv and Sarah firmly on his side, plus Diane's vote, to maintain control. "Have you spoken with Rajiv or Sarah recently?" Marcus asked. "Sarah called me yesterday. She was asking questions about our financial runway and seemed concerned about the Westridge deal falling through. I tried to reassure her, but—" Diane shrugged. "She's an investor at heart. Capital concerns resonate with her." "And Rajiv?" "Haven't heard from him, which could be good or bad. He's always been supportive of your vision for the company, but he's also pragmatic about growth." Marcus absorbed this information, recalibrating his approach for the meeting. "Thank you for the heads up. We should—" His words were cut off by another knock. Tanya opened the door, looking uncharacteristically flustered. Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Richard Patterson is here. He says the board invited him to join a pre-meeting breakfast discussion. Marcus and Diane exchanged alarmed glances. The meeting isn't for over an hour, Marcus said. I know. He's currently in the main conference room with Mr. Green, Mr. Wilkins, and Ms. Rodriguez. They arrived together about 10 minutes ago. The implications were clear. A significant faction of the board was meeting with Patterson without including Marcus. Whatever was being discussed would shape the official meeting to follow. Thank you, Tanya, Marcus said, maintaining his composure despite the churning in his stomach. Please let Michael and Amanda know I'd like to see them in my office immediately. After Tanya left, Diane turned to Marcus with concern. This is worse than I thought. They're orchestrating something. Appears that way, Marcus agreed, his mind racing through scenarios. But they've made a critical mistake by meeting without proper notice to all board members. Amanda will confirm, but I believe that violates our corporate bylaws for board governance. Technically, yes, Diane said, but they could claim it was an informal discussion, not an official board matter. Marcus stood, straightening his tie with deliberate calm. Then we need to make it official. He picked up his phone and sent a quick text to Vanessa Hayes. Situation accelerating. Did you review the envelope? Her reply came seconds later. Yes, ready to proceed on your signal. Team is standing by. Marcus allowed himself a small smile as he tucked his phone away. Patterson and his allies thought they were making a decisive move, but they had severely underestimated what Marcus Reynolds was capable of when backed into a corner. By 8:45 a.m., the tension in Quantum's executive suite was palpable. Board members and executives had gathered in small clusters outside the main conference room, speaking in hushed tones. Richard Patterson stood near the center of one such group, dressed in an impeccable suit and radiating confidence as he chatted with Thomas Wilkins and Elena Rodriguez. Marcus observed this scene from the doorway of his office, where he was finishing a quiet conversation with Michael Okafor and Amanda Wilson. Everything is in place, Amanda confirmed, checking her tablet. Just say the word. Let's wait until we're all seated, Marcus replied. I want to hear what they have to say first. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Stephen Green called the meeting to order. The conference room felt unusually crowded, with the addition of Patterson, who sat between Green and Wilkins as if he were already part of the leadership team. Marcus took his usual position at the head of the table, with Diane to his right and Amanda to his left. The symbolism of the seating arrangement wasn't lost on anyone present. Thank you all for making time for this emergency session, Green began, his tone overly formal. As you know, Quantum Innovations is at a critical juncture in its growth journey. The recent complications with the Westridge capital investment have raised important questions about our path forward. Marcus noted Green's careful avoidance of any direct mention of the actual complications, namely Westridge's attempt to remove Marcus as CEO and Patterson's unauthorized interference. To help us navigate these considerations, Green continued, I've invited Richard Patterson to join us today. Richard brings extensive experience in scaling technology companies globally, and he has some perspectives to share that I believe will be valuable to our discussions. Patterson nodded graciously, as if he'd been bestowed a great honor rather than having engineered the invitation through backdoor maneuvering. Before we continue, Marcus interjected calmly, I'd like to understand the nature of Mr. Patterson's role in this meeting. He is neither a board member nor a Quantum employee. Is he here as a consultant, a potential investor, or in some other capacity? The question, direct but professionally stated, created an immediate awkwardness. Green cleared his throat. Richard is here as a strategic advisor. Given his extensive industry experience and the potential synergies with Quantum's goals, we thought, who is we, exactly? Marcus pressed. This invitation wasn't discussed with me as CEO or with the full board. In fact, I understand several board members were meeting with Mr. Patterson this morning before the official meeting was called to order. Elena Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Wilkins maintained a neutral expression, while Green looked increasingly flustered. "This is precisely the kind of resistance to outside expertise that concerns us, Marcus," Green said, an edge entering his voice. "The ability to accept strategic counsel is crucial for any growing company." "I welcome strategic counsel," Marcus replied evenly. "What I question is the manner in which it's being introduced, particularly from someone who has been actively undermining our company's reputation and interfering with our investor relationships." Patterson, who had been watching this exchange with barely concealed satisfaction, finally spoke up. "Marcus, I understand your defensiveness. Founders often struggle with the transition from startup to scale-up leadership. It's natural to feel threatened when—" "I'm not feeling threatened, Mr. Patterson," Marcus interrupted, his voice still remarkably composed. "I'm observing a coordinated attempt to circumvent proper corporate governance. But please, continue with your prepared remarks. I'm curious to hear what you're proposing." Patterson exchanged a glance with Green, who nodded for him to proceed. Patterson then opened a leather portfolio and distributed printed presentations to each person at the table. "What I'm proposing is a pathway to accelerated growth for Quantum," he began, slipping into what was clearly a rehearsed pitch. "The company has built impressive technology, but its true potential is being limited by its current market approach and organizational structure." For the next 15 minutes, Patterson outlined a vision of Quantum that bore little resemblance to the company Marcus had built. He proposed pivoting away from mid-market clients to focus exclusively on enterprise, restructuring the engineering team to prioritize features demanded by larger clients, and, most tellingly, creating a new executive structure with Patterson as president and COO, reporting to a more strategic role for Marcus as chairman. "With these changes," Patterson concluded confidently, "I've secured preliminary commitments from Westridge and 2 additional investors for a combined round of 60 million, 20 million more than your original target. This would accelerate your European expansion while also strengthening the company's position in North America." The room was silent as board members processed this comprehensive proposal. Marcus waited, allowing the moment to stretch before responding. "Thank you for that detailed presentation, Mr. Patterson," he said at last. "It's clear you've put considerable thought into how you would run Quantum if given the opportunity. However, there are several fundamental problems with your proposal." He turned to Amanda, who handed him a folder. "First, your claim of preliminary commitments from investors is concerning, given that you have no official position with Quantum and no authority to solicit investments on our behalf. Ms. Wilson, our Chief Legal Officer, has prepared documentation explaining how such actions potentially violate securities regulations." Patterson's confident smile faltered slightly. "Those were informal discussions, not formal solicitations." "Second," Marcus continued as if Patterson hadn't spoken, "your strategy fundamentally misunderstands what has made Quantum successful. Our focus on mid-market clients isn't a limitation. It's a deliberate strategy that has yielded 43% year-over-year growth and industry-leading retention rates." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "But the most significant issue is simpler. Mr. Patterson has no legitimate authority to propose a restructuring of Quantum Innovations, nor does he have any right to a leadership position within this company." Green leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Marcus, the board has the authority to consider organizational changes if they're in the best interest of the company. No one is suggesting this would happen without proper process, but—" "Actually, Stephen," Marcus interrupted, his tone still measured but carrying an unmistakable strength, "there's something all of you should know before this discussion goes any further." He nodded to Amanda, who distributed a new set of documents to everyone at the table, except Patterson. "What is this?" Green asked, scanning the first page with confusion. "That is a detailed ownership breakdown of Quantum Innovations," Marcus explained. You'll note on page 3 that while our various funding rounds have diluted my equity percentage, I maintain 42% ownership of the company. Our corporate bylaws, which everyone at this table signed when joining the board, require a 2/3 majority for any major leadership change. Green frowned. We're aware of your significant ownership position, Marcus. No one is suggesting we could force changes without proper procedure. Perhaps not explicitly, Marcus acknowledged. But the separate meeting this morning with select board members, followed by Mr. Patterson's presentation of a restructuring plan, as if it were already in motion, suggests otherwise. He turned to face Patterson directly. Which brings me to the final point. Mr. Patterson has been operating under a critical misunderstanding about quantum, one that I've allowed to continue for strategic reasons. Marcus pressed a button on his tablet, and the large screen on the conference room wall came to life, displaying a corporate organizational chart. At the very top was not Quantum Innovations, but another entity, Reynolds Holdings, LLC. Quantum Innovations is a wholly owned subsidiary of Reynolds Holdings, Marcus explained, his voice steady and clear. While Quantum has raised external capital and created a board structure for governance, Reynolds Holdings maintains majority control. This structure was created during our Series B round and is documented in all subsequent investor agreements, though it's admittedly in the fine print that most people skim past. The room had gone completely silent, with expressions of shock on several faces. Patterson looked utterly confused, while Green had gone pale, frantically flipping through the documents Amanda had distributed. What this means, Marcus continued, is that while I value the board's input and have always operated Quantum as a collaborative enterprise, no restructuring plan, leadership change, or strategic pivot can be implemented without my approval as the controlling shareholder through Reynolds Holdings. He turned to face Patterson directly. In simpler terms, Mr. Patterson, I don't work for the board works for me. The silence that followed was deafening. Patterson's face had drained of color, his confident demeanor completely shattered. Thomas Wilkins and Elena Rodriguez exchanged alarmed glances, while Green stared at Marcus with a mixture of shock and growing respect. This is highly irregular, Patterson finally sputtered. Why would you structure the company this way if you were seeking traditional venture investment? Because, Marcus replied calmly, I've watched too many black founders lose control of their companies through exactly the kind of maneuver you're attempting today. I built Quantum from nothing, through obstacles that most founders never face. I wasn't about to let it be taken away when it finally started to succeed. He turned back to address the full board. To be clear, I've never used this structure to override board decisions before. We've always operated by consensus, and I've valued the expertise each of you brings. But I will not allow an orchestrated takeover to undermine what we've built here. Green cleared his throat. Marcus, I had no idea about this corporate structure. Why didn't you mention this when the Westridge situation first developed? Because I wanted to see who would stand on principle, and who would be swayed by Mr. Patterson's approach, Marcus answered honestly. It's been illuminating. The implied message wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Green looked down at the table, unable to meet Marcus's gaze. Patterson, recovering somewhat from his shock, attempted to salvage the situation. This may change the mechanics, but the fundamental business case remains. Quantum still needs capital for expansion, and Westridge... Actually, Marcus interrupted, that's no longer a concern. He nodded to Amanda again, who distributed one final document to the board members. As of this morning, Quantum has secured a $45 million investment from a joint fund created by Ascend Capital and Threshold Ventures, specifically focused on diverse-led growth companies. He allowed himself a small smile at the looks of astonishment around the table. The term sheet is in front of you. The valuation is 15% higher than what Westridge proposed, with no changes to our leadership structure or strategic direction required. Patterson stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You can't just... He struggled to form a coherent sentence. "Mr. Patterson," Marcus said, his voice steady but with an edge of finality, "I believe we've concluded any business we might have had together. Tanya will show you out." As if on cue, the conference room door opened, and Tanya stood waiting expectantly. Patterson looked around the table, seeking any ally who might intervene on his behalf, but found none. Even Green and Wilkins, who had been most receptive to his overtures, now avoided eye contact. With a final glare at Marcus, Patterson gathered his materials and stormed out, nearly colliding with Tanya in his haste to escape the humiliation. After he'd gone, Marcus addressed the board again, his tone softer but still resolute. "I understand that this revelation may change how some of you view your roles at Quantum. If anyone feels they can no longer serve effectively on this board given today's clarifications, I would accept your resignation without any ill will." He looked directly at Wilkins and Rodriguez, who had been meeting privately with Patterson. Rodriguez had the grace to look embarrassed, while Wilkins maintained a carefully neutral expression. "However," Marcus continued, "I hope you'll all choose to remain. Despite today's unpleasantness, I still value the expertise and perspective each of you brings. Quantum is poised for extraordinary growth, and I want you to be part of that journey, as partners in our success, not architects of a different vision." Stephen Green was the first to speak, his expression thoughtful. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. I allowed myself to be influenced by Patterson's pitch without fully considering the implications or the disrespect it showed to your leadership. That was a mistake I won't repeat." Marcus nodded, accepting the apology without further comment. "I'd like to formally withdraw any consideration of the restructuring proposal," Green continued, "and instead move that we review and approve the term sheet from Ascend and Threshold. Their investment approach seems much more aligned with Quantum's values and direction." "I second that motion," said Sarah Johnson, the independent director who'd been quietly observing the entire exchange. "And I'd add that today's events have given me renewed confidence in your leadership, Marcus. Not many CEOs would have handled this situation with such composure and strategic thinking." The vote to approve the new investment was unanimous, with even Wilkins and Rodriguez quickly aligning themselves with the prevailing sentiment. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, Marcus remained seated, allowing himself a moment to process the emotional roller coaster of the past hour. Diane stayed behind, waiting until they were alone before speaking. "That was masterfully handled," she said quietly. "Though I'm a little hurt you never told me about Reynolds Holdings." Marcus smiled apologetically. "Only 3 people knew, me, Amanda for the legal aspects, and my personal attorney who structured it initially. It was my insurance policy, one I hoped I'd never need to use." "Well, I'm glad you had it," Diane replied. "Patterson's face when you revealed the structure." She chuckled. "That moment alone was worth the secrecy." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa Hayes. "Just heard from our team. Patterson is in the lobby ranting to anyone who'll listen. Security is escorting him out. Congratulations on a masterful chess game." He showed the message to Diane, who laughed outright. "You knew exactly how this would play out, didn't you?" "I had a strong suspicion," Marcus admitted. "Men like Patterson are predictable. They're so convinced of their entitlement that they never consider they might be outmaneuvered." He stood, straightening his suit jacket. "Now we have work to do. That European expansion isn't going to build itself." As Marcus walked through the office toward the elevator, heading to meet Vanessa and the Threshold team for lunch, he noticed something different in how employees regarded him. The respect had always been there, but now there was something else, a new appreciation, perhaps even admiration, for how he had navigated this challenge. News traveled fast in an office, and while the details might not be widely known, the essence was clear. Marcus Reynolds had faced an attempt to push him aside, and had emerged not just intact, but stronger. Outside, the Atlanta spring sunshine had broken through the clouds that had dominated the past week, a fitting metaphor for Quantum's prospects. As Marcus stepped into the waiting car, he allowed himself a moment of reflection on the journey that had brought him here. From a small apartment where he'd coded the first version of Quantum's software, through countless rejections from investors who couldn't see past their biases, to building a company now valued at over $300 million. The attempt to remove him hadn't succeeded, but Marcus harbored no illusions that it would be the last challenge he'd face as a black founder and CEO in an industry still struggling with representation and inclusion. The difference was that now, everyone at Quantum, and soon everyone in their industry, would understand exactly who they were dealing with. Marcus Reynolds wasn't just a successful black entrepreneur who had beaten the odds. He was a visionary who had built safeguards into his very success, anticipating and preparing for the very biases that had nearly derailed him. And in doing so, he had secured not just his own position, but a path forward for quantum innovations that would remain true to the vision and values that had made it successful in the first place. As the car pulled away from the curb, Marcus sent a final text to the executive team. Meeting with new investors at 3 p.m. European expansion planning starts tomorrow. The future is ours to build. If this story taught you something valuable about leadership, resilience, and strategic thinking in the face of bias, please share it with others who might benefit from its message. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us next week for another true story about the unexpected ways our actions can ripple through lives, including our own. Thank you for watching.